Good morning, Brendan. There's a bunch happening right now.
Two coffees in my hand. That's a lot happening. There's two
coffees. Yeah, it's a 2 coffee day.
Double-fisted.
We got so much fog up here in Memphis. The bridge on I-40 going across the Mississippi. The pothole yesterday big enough to put a car through. It was ginormous.
Well, what's going on? Rob's got issues.
Yeah, but a lot happening, man. Football, it's kind of a laid-back week again like it was last week. But, folks, football, big games coming up. We've got Georgia, Notre Dame, Texas and Arizona State and Atlanta. Coach Ellis Johnson joins us here. Tony Barnhart comes on at half past the hour, Mr. College Football. We're going to cover a lot of ground today. Take your phone, take a picture of that QR code, and be a subscriber. We're live streaming on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook at the same time simultaneously. So, Coach Johnson, welcome aboard. We'll get started. And, hey, you watched a lot of these bowl games over the weekend, and the attendance at some of them, you're like, wow, there's nobody there. But I remember back in the early and mid-'80s, I remember the Liberty Bowl going one time, Air Force and Ohio State playing. I don't think there were 5,000 people there, and it was a foggy, rainy, nasty day, and Air Force beat Ohio State. And I go back, then they changed the Liberty Bowl, how they ran it and everything. Steve Earhart, Harold Grader and the team, and now they have great crowds. I think in the last 23 years, they've averaged about 58,000 at the games. Do you see the bowl games all just becoming eventually playoff games as we go from 12 to 14 to 16 to eventually maybe 32?
I don't know. I hope they can incorporate the bowls in some way. As you know, I've never been a playoff guy. So when we start on these topics, I'm usually a wet blanket.
No.
But they're bad now. And then the attendance has never been all that great at bowl games, especially some of the smaller ones. And that is a main factor, but it's not the most important factor. But all these opt-outs, I mean, they've come up with this little word to describe quitters.
It's quitters.
Yeah. And I mean, some of them quit because they're going to be millionaires. And I get the logic in it, but it's still bad. And the TV announcers are trying to put a happy face on it, and it's bad football, and people cutting their TV sets off, and they will quit going to the stadiums. So the playoffs are here to stay. And so I hope that if we enlarge the number of teams in the playoff, I hope they do incorporate the bowl games. Also, I didn't like the home field advantage on the opening rounds, and I don't like the buys. And so, you know, if you did incorporate the bowl games, hopefully you get some neutral sites and you get some good weather, and that could affect the attendance too.
Yeah, and it looks to me like there's the second and third team guys that just maybe rolled in on the portal. There's so much disorganization. You're looking at stupid penalties and just the overall, the product is exciting, but really what it is it's the offenses have such an advantage right now, and it's affecting, I think, the defenses, because I like to see fundamentally sound football. I mean, you like to see a shutout. Your goal is a shutout in every game. Hell, I remember back in the mid-'80s at Auburn, going in the coaches' offices sometimes and seeing on the boards what the goals were. Rush for 250 plus, pass for 160, defense, offense, special teams. They broke it down a third. And now a lot of it is just hanging on and just surviving. And I just like to see elite football. I've always liked that.
Yep, that's a great point. Two little comments on that. Bill Oliver, who you know I've worked with at Alabama.
My favorite of
Bill
all time.
Coached at Chattanooga for a while, then came back, went through the USFL, came back on a major college, et cetera. And I think one of the 1AA jobs came open, and he wanted to know if one of us were interested. He had a friend, and yada, yada. But we got to talking about coaching on that level, and he said, you know, coaching offense on that level was not hard because you could always find a system or a scheme to fit your players and tweak it and do what you wanted to do. On defense, you don't just do what you want to do. You have to defend the other team you're playing.
Yeah.
So you can play zone more, play man more, or blitz less. I'm not saying you're tied into anything, but you have to have players in certain positions, or you can't hide them.
Yeah.
And sometimes on an offensive system, you can. The other thing, if you look at the power at the playoff now, you look at the last teams left, all but two of them are ranked in the top 10 in scoring defense. And the reason I think scoring defense, they call it scoring defense, it should be points allowed.
Yeah.
That, the way college stats are kept, that to me is the most telltale team stat that there is, because it tells you whether they had field position, whether the kicking game's good, whether the offense controlled the ball, whether the defense is good. It's not just the defense being able to go out there and shut out people. All factors in the game, the three phases, contribute to how many points you give up. And it really does tell you a lot. And like I say, if you look at those last 8 teams, 6 of them, and even Georgia's down around something like 20 or 21 this year. And they got to be one of the best defenses in the league. So you look at those others, man, they're right up there in the top 5 or 10. And I think that's it will end up being the factor in who wins the whole thing.
Yeah. And speaking of great defensive players, that 2-year cycle, 21 and 22, where Georgia had 25 players drafted, and a bunch of them are up there, Jalen Carter included, with the Philadelphia Eagles. And Nick Sirianni just won 12 games for the second season in a row. It's paying off in the NFL too. And I'm going to ask you this Georgia Notre Dame game. That's a big one. And then Texas and Arizona State. And by the way, folks, I had a cool conversation over the weekend with Ruben Pizarro. He is the voice of the Texas Longhorn Spanish football broadcast. And I got Dave Cody, my good friend, who watches the show every day out in Bellingham, Washington, was sports anchor in Austin for about 30 years at Channel 7. And I said, do they do the games in Spanish? He said, of course they do. I talked to Ruben. This guy's been doing it 30 years. And they have affiliates for the Texas Longhorns in Argentina, in Spain, all over the world. And I was like, wow. And he said Oklahoma now has their games in Spanish. Tennessee is doing it because I heard it last weekend. I got the broadcast somehow on an app for the Sports Animal, and it was in Spanish. And there's one other school, Texas A&M, of course, been doing it. So college football is growing, Coach. But I'm with you. We need, I don't like to use the term czar. The Romanovs, they got wiped out. That's a bad thing. But a commissioner, Nick Saban, and then have an advisory panel. I think you would be a fantastic addition to that team.
How much are they paying? I might be interested. Otherwise, okay. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't know. I don't think we can go back, so I need to quit talking about it.
Yeah.
As we move forward, it's going to have to get more and more like the NFL. Had they put some kind of structure like you're talking about in place to start with, I don't think we'd have the problems that we have going on with the portal.
Yeah.
To me, the NIL is not the problem. And we're using that term loosely now, but name, image, likeness, and it has nothing to do with that anymore. Kids are not really going out making money off of their name, off of their image, or their likeness anymore. They're getting paid because of what position they play and how well they play it.
That's right.
That's NFL. So you need a commish or czar or whatever you want to call it. You do need, the owners in the NFL control the league. Well, if you let the coaches control the NCAA, which is not practical, it would be a hell of a lot better than it is right now, because they would all know the problems they're dealing with on the ground level, the money part, the personnel part, and all that. And they would come up with some rules that would allow them to keep the players happy and also keep some parity in the game. If they lose the parity, you're going to lose about 2/3 of your fan base. It might excite those teams in those top 12 teams, top 15 teams. Those fan bases might be all happy, and so will TV. But you're going to start losing people who don't like the fact that it's back to the way it was in the late 60s or something.
Yeah, and they talk about the television aristocracy in the 70s, where you could be on 5 times in 2 years, but it was often the same teams all the time. And that's what I've been saying is you're going to draw more eyeballs because you've got people coast to coast and everywhere in between. I mean, Arizona is a big TV market. I mean, Phoenix is really big. Coach, Georgia Notre Dame. It's a line of scrimmage league, the SEC for sure. Notre Dame's pretty damn good. They're sitting there at 12-1. What do you know about Marcus Freeman as a coach, other than, as Franz Beer told me, he was the leading tackler against Florida in the 2006 national championship game. He had 15 tackles in a losing effort, but and I know his agent here in Memphis really, really likes Marcus.
Yeah, I don't know him at all, and just all I do is have an impression like y'all.
Yeah,
I do think this is two really good defensive teams, and two teams who now have possibly some quarterbacks with freckles. I've never been a huge Riley Leonard fan. I think he's a really good quarterback, but I don't think he's one of the top quarterbacks in the NCAA. I think you can force him into making bad plays. And then you don't know what you've got with Georgia because Stockton's going to make his first start. And that's a huge challenge being in the playoffs and you get your first start. But both of them are winners. Both of them are good kids. They both got some mobility. If they don't try to throw the ball better than they're capable of throwing the ball, and they realize who they are and their surrounding cast can help them, it'll be a heck of a ball game. It's just going to boil down to which team can make the other quarterback make a critical mistake, I think.
Yeah. When you look at it, and Brendan and I talk football every day with smart people, not many like you with your mind. If you had to say where's a weak spot on Georgia's team, defense, offense, special teams, what stands out to you?
The thing that overall has been it all year is the receiver core. And I don't think they're that bad, but they're not elite. And that's what they did have 2 or 3 years ago. McConkey and Bauer and some of those guys, and a couple of guys out on the edge who could get deep. And, man, that opens up a running game huge. So I think Carson Beck has been more outstanding this year than people have given him credit. I don't think he has the targets that they've had there in the past.
Yeah.
So that would be one, I would say. And if Notre Dame's good enough to stop that running game or at least slow it down, it may be hard for them to throw the football well enough to put points on Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I feel the same way on the flip side, though. But I do think it's the overall receiver core.
Yeah, and you look at Ladd McConkey, he's playing for the Chargers. I watched him yesterday. And then you saw what Brock Bowers did. 108 receptions this year. That's the most ever for a rookie in the NFL playing for the
Rob, he broke a record that Ditka held since 1961. When you start breaking records that are, 70 years
3
old?
years old, yeah.
70 years old. I can't add.
Yeah.
1961, that record stood. And throw the ball more and more since then. So it really tells you how good Ditka was. But, man, Bowers, he's a really good player.
It does tell you how good Mike Ditka was. 108 receptions as a tight end. And typically people, there's a tight end award that's given out. I think it was John Mackey. Is that the tight end? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And he played at Notre Dame, I think.
He played at Penn State.
Penn State, okay.
Either Penn State or Syracuse. I can't remember. My oldest brother played against him.
Wow. Well, so, Brock Bowers is from Napa, California. I think he's one of the best players we've ever seen in the SEC. Brendan, I got to ask you, coming out of Jacksonville, when Carson Beck was in high school, I talked with some Georgia fans over the weekend who said he was a 5-star, not just in football, but also baseball. And Florida really targeted him to be a pitcher. How good was he? I mean, Florida's got athletes like no other state in America because of the track and field programs.
Well, it's all their programs. I mean, gymnastics, women's softball, even an emerging female soccer program.
Yeah.
Florida's balanced all the way through. The joke is, look how many national championships they win outside of football the last several years, which is, I don't know the number, but it's quite a few.
Yeah.
And look at the baseball program. We talked about SEC baseball the other day. Florida likes, they like those dual I think you attract the dual sport athlete because, if you want to go play baseball and football or something else, you get to play on very high level teams as well as go to a great school.
Well, I'm just talking about the high schools in Florida, their track and field programs. And Coach,
Well,
yeah,
of course you're going to
incredible.
get that. Like, look in Gainesville, that's where some of the top track and field athletes come out of every year.
Yeah.
There's some huge high school invitational down there that even kids from the Carolinas go down. I've never been there.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it's really cool to watch.
Coach, one of the schools in Memphis University School, my school, Christian Brothers High School, since 1871, the big Catholic school, all boys. That's our big rival. In 2001, Coach Bobby Austin said, we're not doing spring practice anymore. He told all of his football players, because of 7-on-7s and summer camps, he said, we don't need spring practice. But he said, you've got to do the following. You've got to play lacrosse, participate in track and field, or both. And I'm a big believer, having volunteer coached at 14 years in cross country with middle school kids. It's your insurance policy for every sport you play. A guy that you coached, I still think one of the toughest players ever is Carl Lawson out of Milton and Alpharetta. Wasn't he a state powerlifting champion? And his dad was a pretty damn good player at Georgia Tech. But I think he threw the shot of the discus. And also, I'll tell you another one. In the old days, Shug Jordan, you had to wrestle or swim in the offseason at Auburn. I just think those multi-sport athletes are the best.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I grew up in a small town. We didn't have a whole lot to do. And so you usually played whichever sport was in season.
Yeah.
Or most all the guys played more than one. Of course, we didn't have but one girls sport, and that was basketball.
Yeah.
But times were different. But Carl, I didn't know about the track stuff, but I knew he was a powerlifting or either the high school weightlifting competitions, which are not all powerlifting. Some of them like bench press and stuff. Yeah. But that's what his dad was a personal trainer.
Okay.
And he played on the 1990, I think, the national championship team they had. And I told you this earlier. We had the same head coach. The only thing is Bobby Ross coached me at the Citadel when he was about 34. Yeah. And he coached Lawson at Georgia Tech when he was about 50. So it wasn't the same football.
Well, Bobby Ross is a VMI grad, and I remember his career, hell of a career. And I think another one of the most underrated coaches ever is George Welsh, what he did at Virginia. I love to watch football, to see these guys build these programs, especially when they don't have every advantage in the book. But it's also, and from coaching at the best programs in Alabama and South Carolina and Auburn and Mississippi State, you've coached at a lot of places where you had every resource in the world. Nothing's going to be given to you because everybody's going to if you're Alabama and you could be 2-8, you're going to get the very best from everybody you play because you're Alabama. And just like they call it the Saban discount in recruiting, maybe they didn't have to pay as much in NIL because of Nick Saban. And I've actually had a general manager at Alabama said at the Touchdown Club, he just said, Alabama's still going to get some players that come there because it's Alabama, even though they may take less money because they know they have a clearer path in their mind to get to the league. So it's nothing. Tradition never graduates. I want to ask you about Texas and Arizona State. Brendan knows a lot about that Mountain West and Pac-12 football from living out there for years. I think that's going to be a better game than people are probably expecting. And that running back Scatterboot for Arizona State, he gets more yards after contact than anybody since Herschel or Bo.
Yeah, it could be. I think Texas has got way too much speed on the field, both in the big kids and the skill guys.
Yeah.
That to not win the football game, but I think Arizona State will be a lot better opponent than people think they are, and I'm just basing that on the turnaround. I think it's a portal thing. He brought in a lot of transfers, but now he's changed the culture of that team. And 2-3 years ago, that place was in an absolute mess, and NCAA stuff and everything else. 25 years ago, you couldn't recover the way he has so fast. because you wouldn't have the ability to bring in all those transfers.
Yeah.
But somehow they've molded them together. And I saw them play one time late in the year. Could have been the conference championship game, but I was pretty impressed with them offensively. Now, defensively, I don't know how they slow Texas down. They're ranked somewhere in the 30s on points allowed. And I don't, either them or Boise State are the two worst still left in the brackets. And of course, everybody's complaining about them getting the buys and all that good stuff. But my biggest concern about both those teams is defensively giving up points. That tells you a little bit about their football team. They're both not ranked very well in that aspect.
Yeah, and I look at Texas, and I think about this team. Their defensive line, they're so big and strong. Having coached that as a defensive coordinator, you've coached probably, I'm sure, every position. Bill Oliver, I've been always fascinated by the man from Epps, Alabama, over in the Black Belt. He's coached. He's everywhere he's coached. When he was in Memphis, he lived in Logan Young's guest house there for a while when he was defensive coordinator of the Showboats. So everybody in Memphis, he's a rock star. And I know you learned a lot from him. But he taught something called interchangeability. And everybody on the defense knew everybody else's assignments. And every now and then, you know him. I mean, I never met him, but they would rush 10 or 11 on a full blitz. That was pretty cool. You got to have a lot of confidence. But when you got a defense with guys like Terrence Lynch and Antonio Langham and Chad Keys out of Thomasville, Georgia, remember that big guy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, how much fun was that to turn them loose?
Well, it was fun because, we thought we were really smart. And then we watched all 11 of our starting defensive players go to the NFL. And then several years later, some of these defenses that were same defenses, they weren't working as well for me. But it was a really fun group to coach. The thing that I remember so much about that season, we went through the entire year, and the only injury we had, we lost our nose tackle, James Gregory, for about a week. And then the second thing that happened to us, one of our inside linebackers got hurt in a car wreck before the national championship game. And we actually went to a scheme where you put a lineman in place of the inside backer. So you cover the guard instead of playing over the top of him with a linebacker. And we had to drop both outside backers sometimes to complement the coverage. But it really confused Miami. They screwed up their protection on it with that extra lineman in there some. And we got a couple of tackle for losses and a sack out of it. But anyhow, that was a key, one of the keys to us being that successful on defense, because we didn't have any kids out the whole year hardly.
Yeah, and I think about James Gregory. There's a picture on the front of every paper in America of him grabbing Heath Schuler, like Plowboy Frazier grabbing somebody in the wrestling ring and just body slamming him. And that kid was out of East St. Louis, I think, or St. Louis. Yep. An incredible. You said he was the only guy on that defense that did not go to the NFL. You had just John Copeland out of Valley or Lynette, Alabama. When I worked in Columbus, we covered high school football in all those towns for about 75 to 100 miles in Georgia and Alabama. That's some of the best high school football I've ever seen to this day. And you think about this matchup with Texas, and I think Texas wins the game. I definitely think they're going to win the game. And then I look at Georgia. Going back to this, I like Blind Squirrel Sports. He agreed with what you said. It says a lot of Georgia fans have adopted the Philly Dogs. So, I mean, you've got half a dozen players at least on that team. And you look at Alabama's got to play Michigan. You wonder now, Coach, we thought nobody would transfer out if they were going to be in the playoffs. But it's actually happened. That's what surprises me. Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney. Okay, Dabo, I don't know if he's going to embrace the portal, but he's still got his team to the playoffs this year. If he embraces the portal at Clemson, what happens? I think they have a high ceiling if he does.
Yeah, and of course that word embrace. What I can tell you, he probably will not do.
Yeah,
he's not going to start taking 5, 8 kids in the portal each year.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to do it. Now, he's already got 2 this year. And
Okay.
one of them's a defensive end. The other one, I think, is a wide out. I'm not sure. And I think he's going to start filling some holes. But what happens, one of the big things he's trying to avoid is players leaving. And what happens when you start bringing in these portal kids, it makes the players that you recruited a year earlier or 2 years earlier, and you told them this is our plan for you and yada, yada. And he gets there and he's struggling a little bit in some aspect. It's going to take him a little longer to develop into that starter that you want him to be. And another kid comes in on a portal deal and takes the job, and he's going to sit even another year, and they take off out the door. And that's what he's trying to avoid. I don't know. I just don't know, Rob, if he can or can't. I wish it would work because I prefer that way. And really, he and Kirby Smart, even after that first game when Georgia beat them so bad, they were making a big deal out of the receivers, I think, or DBs that Kirby had taken, like 2 of them, and they were crucial and they were playing good. He didn't take a bunch of portals. He's not brought in 10 kids every year. He's still building it on his high school recruiting, and then he's supplementing it, I guess you'd say. And I think they both feel the same way about it. Yeah. They want to recruit, develop, and they want that culture. They want their locker room to be bulldogs and tigers, and not looking out the window every other day, seeing if there's a better portal deal out there. I don't know if you can do it today. I really don't.
No, I like what you just said. And that's Kirby did say that after the Clemson game. They won 34-3, but he said, I love my kids. So that says a lot. Exactly. Let me say something about one of our sponsors, Winter Timber Outdoors, Athens, Alabama. Folks, if you love to hunt, everything from dove hunting all the way into turkey hunting, duck hunting, big game, quail, grouse, pheasant, geese, they've got you covered from A to Z. Winter Timber Outdoors. They're going to grow throughout the Southeastern Conference. They're putting stores. They broke ground a month ago in Auburn. Expected opening this spring, late May, early June. Get on there. Check them out. They've got everything. You can buy all your gear. They're a big Sitka dealer, okay? They've got over 2,000 shotguns, rifles, and handguns in the store. They got a staff that knows what they're doing. Order online. Check out and take a picture of that QR code, Winter Timber Outdoors. Rete Masimara, GPS, buy one, get one. And the St. Nick's knives. They've got a collection of pocket knives and all the knives that go way back. Top quality in everything they do. It's the nicest store you'll ever go into. Winter Timber Outdoors. Proud to be associated and have them as a sponsor. Look forward to growing with them in the coming years. And Coach, again, Brendan and I are so lucky to talk to a lot of really smart people. And I get to be on his dad's show, the Buddy Martin Show, 1 or 2 times a week. Tony Barnhart's going to be on here with us in a minute. And I'm looking forward to hearing y'all two go back and forth. And we're going to talk about his book, which is a cool story of life in the South. I think what you just said is true about anything in business. If you're brought into a company and they want you to, eventually run the company and they keep bringing in people, that can get you fired up from a competitive standpoint. But if you're always looking over your shoulder, that's not so good. And like you talk about Dabo, hey, if we're not developing you, that's on us. We got to do a better job. I like taking ownership and responsibility. Man, I love having you on the show for a lot of reasons, but that's dead on. I love it.
Well, it also puts a little more pressure on the coach who's doing the recruiting. Make better decisions, make better evaluations, and, you recruit your position. If you don't have players in 2 or 3 years, that's your fault.
Yeah, it is.
Don't blame the players. You recruited them.
That's right. All right, let's bring
real
in.
Quickly.
Yeah.
I got a correct. John Mackey played at Syracuse. It just hit me in.
Okay. Okay. Because Fred Biletnikoff, of course, played at Florida State. So it's kind of Ray Guy, Southern Miss. It's amazing. Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Coach Ellis Johnson, Brendan Martin, all here with us. Not much going on in college football right now, but pull something out of the air for us. I love this time of year.
There's a whole lot going on. Coach
Yeah.
Johnson will tell you there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
People trying to get ready for bowl games. People trying to figure out NIL deals. It is absolutely crazy right now.
Tony, Georgia, Notre Dame. I sent you a text the other day. I know you get a million a day, but I've got this ongoing debate with a really good friend, lives in Atlanta, big Irish Catholic family from Memphis. The family's, 2 Notre Dames, 2 Vandy's, and 1 Georgia Tech grad. He goes, Bobby, I guarantee you the average LSU fan in the state of Louisiana that's Catholic will be pulling for Notre Dame over Georgia. I said, no, they're going to pull for the SEC. I said,
Right.
I am. Again, my perspective on Georgia is unique. Growing up like I did, and I'm good friends with Ralph Jordan Jr., his godfather's Wally Butts, and they have houses next to the Dooleys. I'm completely different than most people, but I'm pulling for the SEC. Always will. What do you think will happen with the crowd down there? You've been to more than one Sugar Bowl.
I have been to more than one Sugar Bowl. I think it's going to be a great game. Now, It's going to be – you could play the game inside of a phone booth. The way the game's going to be played, it's going to be like 17-14, 20-17, because both teams play great defense. Both teams, when they're running the ball, they are most effective. We'll have a lot of conversations about the quarterback position in Georgia. But the key to the game is Trevor Etienne and his ability to go to distance. If he can, Georgia's got a good chance to win. This has been an interesting, Rob, this has been an interesting Georgia team to cover. Yeah. The last 3 Georgia teams have simply been better than 90% of the people they play. And this team is not demonstrably better. It's a good team now, don't get me wrong, and it's a team that can win the national championship. But a friend of mine who works in the business, sports writing business, said Georgia's the toughest team that he has seen in a long, long time. They find ways to win games. I guess the schedule we all talked about was a very difficult schedule, incredible. Yeah. And for them to win 10 games and be in this position says a lot about that team and then the coaching of it.
Tony, I wanted to ask you about the coaching for Georgia. I picked Georgia early on to win. No big, insight there. A lot of people picked them to win, but I picked them to win because I felt like Kirby was going to think differently about this year and how to play the season. I think he's a strategist. I think he thinks about this. Maybe this might be Ellis Johnson coach can talk about this as well, but it feels like he's got everything sort of working towards the end and the right thing. It wasn't going to make the same mistakes twice. Someone like ETN coming on, it seems like he's really coming on at the end of the year, right? Like he had all those sort of hiccups to start and whatnot, but now he's really your guy pushing you through. Like you just said, he is the difference maker. Can you just talk? Do you think Kirby coached differently this year, or do you think it just was a different season?
I just think it was a different team. I mean, there was no Brock Bowers. There was no Ladd McConkey. You didn't have that big play wide receiver. And you can run, and he wants to run the ball. And he'll tell you that he wants to run the ball. And that gives them the best chance to win. Here's the other thing about Georgia, guys, is that you remember the Alabama game in Tuscaloosa. They fall behind 28-0 or 28-3. They come all the way back and take the lead with not a whole lot of time left. Georgia did not win that game. But what it taught them, people that I talked to, what it taught them is no matter what the circumstances are, you keep playing. You keep playing. Georgia Tech, they had no business winning that football game. Georgia Tech dominated that game. Georgia fought back, got it into overtime, and won in 8 overtimes. This is just it's not nearly as talented as the last 3 Georgia teams, but they are very resourceful.
Coach Johnson, I've said this more than once. I think it's the best coaching job Kirby's done since he's been at Georgia. You agree?
Yes, overall, you'd have to, looking from the outside in. I mean, Tony's touched on every bit of it and overlapped a lot of what I said earlier. They're not the most skilled team in the league, and certainly not the most skilled Georgia team. They probably had 2 or 3 teams better athletically than this team over the last 5 years. But this team evidently is mentally tough, and they really are about, I tell you, what they've gone through this season physically and with the competition level and overcome some of it. And it's just amazing what they've done.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a playoff team. If you ask, that's kind of ball you're going to have to play almost every week to get through the playoffs now that you get down to these top 8 teams.
Tony, when you talk to Kirby Smart, is he having as much fun as he had 5 years ago, or is it different now? Because I think he's the best coach in college football because of this season alone. And you're right. When you play Georgia, you're going to have to get down in the dirt and play a full 60. And other teams know that. I'm with you. We were over in Atlanta that week watching the Georgia Tech game. I wish I'd have gone. And we're going to talk about your book right after this. But I just think the fact that, and we talked about this right before you came on, most of these kids have been at Georgia their whole careers. Look at Carson Beck. How many times could he have said, "No, I'm out of here. I'm going somewhere else"?
Yep.
That roster of a bunch of guys, as Coach Dye used to say, sooner or later, the horse that thinks he can will.
All right. Well, and Georgia's very resourceful in what they do. They believe in each other. What Gunnar Stockton did and what that team did when Carson Beck gets hurt, the fact that they would rally around him in the second half and find a way after, because when he got hurt, when Beck got hurt, it was, oh, well, that's over. The game's over. Then there's no way you can win under those circumstances. But yet again, they've found a way to win. I think Kirby is enjoying this team as much as any team he's enjoyed there. But again, as we talked about, and as Coach Johnson mentioned, is that this is the team where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Yeah. They find a way to win. And that's why I picked him in the preseason to win the national championship, and I haven't backed off of that.
All right, let's talk for a minute about your book, The 19 of Green. And I like to absolutely every time you're on this show because you are helping us so much by being on here. We want to help you every way we can. It's a great book. But why do we love college football so much in the South? Because it's a story of life, people pulling together, one for all for one. And Coach Johnson grew up in a small town in South Carolina, Winsboro. I think we all need to read this. Talk about it.
Well, this is the story of my senior year at Greene County High School in Greensboro, Georgia. That's about halfway between Atlanta and Augusta off I-20. It's the Lake Oconee area, people who travel over there. And in the fall of 1970, the courts ruled that we had a black school, had a black high school and a white high school. Greene County High School was the white school and the black high school was Ford T. Curry. The courts ruled that those schools would finally, once and for all, completely integrate. And so for the fall of 1970, we had an integrated football team. We only had 19 guys on the team, which is where the title comes from. And it's really not about football, although football is sort of the glue that holds it together. It's about the fact that 50 years after we played our last game together, we have stayed in touch. And one of my very best friends today is Charles Turner, the quarterback, the black quarterback on that 1970 team. We won 7 out of our last 8, played for our region championship, and we still stay in touch today. We try to gather every year during homecoming.
Well, I mean, Coach, you know this. The guys that stick together, you play together 4 or 5 years with a bunch of guys on a team, whether you win every game or you win half of them, you can't get any closer other than having gone to war together. And it's a great book. And Coach, you need to get a copy if you hadn't read it. It'll make you feel great about living in the South and college football and high school football, which is still, I guess, an amateur sport, guys. I'm not sure what it is, but it's a great story.
Yeah, I would love to read the book. It kind of reminds me when I was in high school, we won a state championship my senior year, and we had a 50th reunion about 4 or 5 years ago. All but 2 of the people on that team who were still alive came to the reunion. Mm-hmm. And we had about 5 black players on the team, and one of our black players drove from Texas for that reunion.
God, that's awesome.
Yep. That is good. We had a book signing at our old high school, and the whole community turned out, and all but about 2 of the black players showed up, and it was an incredible day. We had a long table, so that there's a chapter on every guy in the book. We put together a long table where every guy who was there on that team got to sign the books for the fans who were there. It was it's an incredible memory, and it's what football does. Football is a very transformative sport, and that's why we love it so much.
It really is. And you're sitting here now. I mean, hell, I can remember the last time Georgia Notre Dame played in a Sugar Bowl. It was 1980. I was in high school, and I think Georgia won 17-14 or 17-10. And Herschel hurt his right shoulder going around in on one of his touchdown runs. I think he had 147 yards rushing in that game.
With a separated shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. He's pretty good. Well, as Lauren Smith likes to say, Rob, I was telling the Georgia coaches about him when he was a junior, and they were like, Wrightsville, Georgia. He said, was it Matt Cavanaugh? He said, they don't have a stoplight in Wrightsville. And he goes, well, we got a youngster down there that's a junior named Herschel Walker that you need to come see. And he said 2 weeks later, the front headline of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution was Wrightsville Jr. runs like 9,500 or something like that. He said all of a sudden everybody in the world was going down there to see him. But those stories, I can remember. I think Herschel signed after church Easter Sunday afternoon.
That's right.
Correct? Okay.
That is right.
Yeah,
that is
kind
right.
of a powerful statement there.
Herschel Walker, who did not start his first game at the University of Georgia, who had to be brought in when Georgia was behind 15-2. Mike Cavan, who was a running backs coach who did most of the heavy lifting, recruiting Herschel, told Coach Dooley at halftime, Coach, we got to put that guy in the game. And the rest is history.
Yeah, I was listening on my little white transistor radio in 1980. I was at the Liberty Bowl in Memphis at a game. And he goes, now we're going to put the freshman for Wrightsville in the ball game. Jimmy Womack out of Warner Robins has been trying to do it. We'll see what he can do. And, that was kind of a historical night, Coach Johnson.
I remember it. One of my bucket lists that I never got to do was to be the defensive coordinator at Georgia when Larry used to call the games. I mean, I used to get those tapes when he was announcer. We would just be rolling in the floor. He would describe his goal line defenses. The Dogs are in a 9-1-1 or something like that. And I thought, God, I'd love to be the coordinator and have him call one of our games and have that tape for life.
Classic. Just classic.
Yeah. But I mean, again, and I still am a radio junkie. And I saw Andy Burcham right after the Auburn, Texas A&M game. And these guys work so hard. And he was coming out of the locker room. And I was asking, I said, can you jump on the show with us Monday morning? He said, man, I'm leaving in the morning at 7 from Atlanta to go to Hawaii for the basketball tournament. Did all those games out in Maui, got back in Friday, and they did the Iron Bowl on Saturday. But nothing's better than having a great radio announcer and watching the game. Tony, you look at these games that are being played right now. I referenced that we had low attendance 40 years ago in bowl games, and then I look at what Harold Grader and Steve Earhart and the Memphis people did with the Liberty Bowl with AutoZone's help, and they get great crowds there. What's going to happen? Are we going to I'm with Coach Johnson. I don't want to lose the bowls because we're celebrating college football every time we have a game, and I don't care who's playing. I'm going to watch it. I'm like my 96-year-old dad. It's a game. They're keeping score. It matters.
No, and it does. And ultimately, Rob, I just think the marketplace is going to sort of determine and it's also our, if you have a local organizing committee that Harold and the folks do in Memphis, that's a strong organizing committee. And you and I have been to their touchdown club meetings. And that's what you've got to have, because you got to get the sponsorship dollars. You got a lot of things. You have to have a great volunteer. There's a lot of work that goes into these games, but the problem thing about it is people watch these games. Yeah. They really do. It's relatively inexpensive programming for our friends at ESPN, so they want to keep them live. And really, you don't have to make money on them. Just it's an opportunity for the kids, an opportunity for the fans.
Yeah, and Brendan, I'll throw this at you. Preseason, Tony and Coach Johnson on the show, Buddy Martin's show, we were picking Florida. I picked them to win 8 games they got the 8th game in the bowl game. So I was watching every minute of that. That was a big deal. And I know that people will say, well, they lost some games the way they did. Who knows what's going to happen this year with DJ Lagway, but that was a bowl game that really mattered. Then you look at Tulane, their quarterback and all that crazy stuff going on, not there. I just think it's never okay to lose. In the bowl games give you one more chance to win, but people say it's all for the Chamber of Commerce or whatever. But
I think it's old school thinking now. It's obviously it doesn't matter. Like the lower ones don't matter. I mean, let's be honest. Nobody's caring. The coaches aren't caring. Players aren't caring. A lot of people aren't playing.
So I'm worried about.
We saw it last year with FSU. We saw it's a trend. So we got to make them matter because I went to Florida. I went down to I always call it the Outback Bowl because it always feels like the Outback Bowl. But I went and watched Florida play Tulane. It's hard to go to a football game when the upper bowl's not full. It's hard to get it up when it really just feels like a preseason football game in the NFL.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like college football. So why water down your brand? Why you had a tremendous year in ratings and everything else. Everyone thought college football was going to fall apart. It didn't. So why do we have this sort of to me, the bowl game feels like a hangover. We got to figure out how to make it matter, or we have to get rid of it and expand the playoffs. And that's just kind of how I feel about it. Because this watered down version of it, it's not very fun. I don't think it's good for the sport.
Yeah. Well, I mean, y'all take a stab at that. I'm just saying you want the games, they should matter, but he's right. Unless you have like what you've got in Memphis with Steve Earhart and Harold Grader and that Liberty Bowl team. And guys, look what they did in Atlanta with the Peach Bowl. Is that not one of the best examples of getting people involved, guys? That's one of the most coveted bowl tickets in America.
Well, guys, one of the things that I would add to the discussion is that I think you're eventually going to see bowl games, not the playoffs, but the bowl games, because of NIL, because of all that, they're going to evolve. Instead of being the last game of this season, it's going to be the first game of next season. It's going to be about showcasing the talent that you've got coming back and selling it that way. Okay, let's look ahead. Let's look at Gasway. I just think it's going to evolve into looking ahead as opposed to putting a wrap on the final season. Now the seniors can play if they want to. That's great, but I think that's what's going to happen.
Coach,
one of the other things that's causing so much trouble, it all started when they started opting out for the NFL.
Right.
But then the portal came in with all the NIL money, and the portal window is creating a lot of problems. I never thought about it. It made sense to me to have a portal after the fall and another portal after the spring, because that way the kids knew exactly where they stood. And it's all about the kids now. So what's happened now, this first portal window, it's causing chaos with these coaches trying to hold a team together for a bowl game. The worst one might have been North Carolina. No coach, a bunch of players gone, and opponent that they don't usually play. It was just, you could tell they were trying hard to put a product out there, but it just wasn't good.
Yeah.
Tony, do you see something like our coach? Can we see an NIT or something like that, like we do in basketball? Can we see a development of these bowl games getting together or doing some sort of, I don't know, I always call it not in tournament, right? But I just feel like we're going to, we're expanding out into all these different directions. I don't know where we'll end up next.
Well, I think that decision is going to be made with the next decision that's coming up in 2026.
Yeah.
Are you going to go to 14? Are you going to go to 16? Because that's going to have a trickle down effect to what else happens. So my sense, though, guys, in talking to people, is that the bowls are sort of going to have to figure out what their niche is, because I just think it's a situation where the marketplace is going to decide what happens to these bowls.
Yeah, it's all TV runs the place now.
Right. That's right.
TV runs college sports.
Yeah.
Yep.
I got some questions on here. Blind Squirrel Sports. Is it safe to say Gunnar Stockton will be very prepared to lead this team? I've heard he's been practicing like he was QB1 the entire year and spends hours after practice studying film. Tony, what do you know about Gunnar Stockton, and can you tell people? Because I got a lot of Georgia friends, a bunch of them. the Boones, Jeff and Thomas in my hunting club, especially, every day they walk around when they're at the house over here. They say, it's great to be a Georgia Bulldog. Every day they say that. And right now it is.
Well, Coach Johnson can tell you this because he's recruited everywhere on the planet Earth. And he's from Rabun County, Georgia, Rabun County High School up in North Georgia. And Coach, you can back me up on this. Those North Georgia kid, that's a different kind of cat now.
Yeah.
Here's the example that I love. It tells you everything you need to know about Gunnar Stockton. A big deal was made out of the fact that Carson Beck was driving a Lamborghini around campus, and everybody thought that was true. What does Connor Stockton drive?
Probably an F-150.
A Ford F-150.
I knew it. He should have got it at Landers Ford. If he didn't, he probably paid too much. Proud to have them as a sponsor.
I promise you, he's got Kirby's guy working for him. Yeah. Okay,
guys, the truck is 20 years old.
I love it.
I mean, the North Georgia kids are just a different breed of kid. They are tough.
Yeah.
And he comes from a football family. And he has grown up playing for Mike Bobo and all of that stuff. And I just think he prepares very, very. You talk about the preparation thing. Yeah. Mike Bobo had a story was quoted today in the AJC saying how impressed he was that all year long Gunnar Stockton was prepared. We tell the players to prepare as if they're going to be in there. Well, guess what? Yeah. He did, and he was. And so I am anxious to see if he can hold the mistakes down and not make any bad throws. I think they've got a chance to win this game. But Gunnar Stockton they call it mountain blood, and he is a tough kid.
Yeah, Tony mentioned what popped in my head immediately when you said, will he be ready? Mike Bobo will be a big factor on that. And he's got 2 or 3 weeks with him now where he is literally getting the first team snaps. And then I think the other thing, there is no better preparation than what he did the other day when he came in against Texas. Okay. Yeah. That 30 minutes will be as valuable to him as any practice he has before or after.
Yeah. You know, he doesn't let the moment be bigger than it really was. I mean, that hit he took, most people wouldn't have gotten up from that. And I think he endeared himself to the Georgia fans and just to college football fans as a tough guy. And you're right. You get up there north of Helen, Brasstown Bald, up there near the Chattooga River. That is a tough cat. Remember, that's where they filmed the movie Deliverance. There's some tough. I'm saying there's some tough people up there in the mountains, and I agree. And you know, when you look at all these matchups, Tony, 4 million is considered good to have 4 million people watch a game. Mm-hmm. And back in the 70s, before 1984, when all the games went on TV, I don't know what the numbers were because there were only a couple of games every weekend. It changed. So you had 12 million watch Georgia and Alabama, and that's with every game being on TV. Now you're shrinking it down to a smaller window. What do you think the numbers are going to be for Georgia, Notre Dame,
huge,
Texas, Arizona State?
Notre Dame, Georgia will be huge.
Yep.
Yeah. Notre Dame, dude. I mean, God, look at the map. It's like Georgia, Notre Dame. The Domers are everywhere.
Yeah.
No, the numbers for anything that involves Notre Dame, Georgia, and Ohio State is going to draw exceedingly well. Yeah. And so the numbers will be. Now, are they NFL numbers? No, but they never aspired to be NFL numbers. But I think the numbers will do really, really well. And you know, the TV boys would love Notre Dame in the national championship game. They would love that.
Well, let's think about what did Prime do for ratings for Fox? I mean, we talked to Urban Meyer. He's like, yeah, we're gonna go cover Coach Prime again this weekend for Big Noon. Yeah, he's like, you know, that was they were doing 9, 10, 11, 12 million for a Colorado game. I mean, that was nuts.
That is, and think about Travis Hunter, Sewanee, Collins Hill High School, where the Falcons train.
Yep.
The Heisman Trophy, and it was going to Florida State. What had the irony? And one of Florida State's greatest players ever pulls him to Jackson State and then to Colorado. Coach, we'll wrap it up here. And one more comment from each of you. Coach, you look at the games, what do you like the most of all these playoff matchups coming up? Anything really jump out at you?
True. Well, I told you earlier, the thing that I was noticed real quickly when it got down to these 8 teams, all of them but Arizona State and Boise State, who got in by winning conferences, all these teams are ranked really at the very top in the country in points allowed. And to me, again, that is the most important college stat for a team. It tells you more about that team in all phases than any other statistic does, because you can't keep points down unless you're playing well in all 3 phases. So I think it's going to be great. The defenses are going to show up. Now, who's got the quarterbacks that can still make critical third down plays and then hit a couple of explosives? That'll probably determine who wins it all. And I don't think as many lopsided matchups as people think there are. I think the Penn State Boise could be a decent game. And I think that the Texas Arizona State could be a decent game. I don't think there'll be blowouts, but any game at this level can be a blowout, because these guys are some 19-year-olds out there mixed in with these players, and they do things sometimes that you don't coach. But I think we'll see 4 really good games this time, and I think it's going to get better and better.
Okay. Well, and I don't know who, I've got a new award now. It's the guy that's been in college the George Blanda Award. Okay. That guy at Miami this year was in his 9th year for the Hurricanes. So I guess he's not coming back next year, but there's some new JUCO rule, guys, that's come out that might keep guys in longer.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember Chuck Oliver talking a couple of years ago about playing BYU. He said, listen, you get a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds out there playing against a bunch of 24 and 25-year-old linemen that have been riding a mountain bike around Australia or America, getting doors slammed in their face every day. They get pretty tough, pretty ornery. And BYU, they may drink a lot of Dr. Pepper, but they will get after you. But Tony, your thoughts as we head into this playoff, because I mean it's pretty exciting, to say the least.
Well, it is exciting, and I think the games this time around are going to be much more competitive. I was disappointed in the game should have been more competitive, and I think we'll get those. And I just think Notre Dame, Georgia is going to be the one that everybody's going to look at. And oh, by the way, Oregon and Ohio State, there's a lot of NFL players on that team, guys. Those 2 teams, I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Tony, let them know how they can follow you, keep up with all your great work, and let's do this again next week. I love it.
Well, our website is TMG College Sports. TMG stands for the media guys, and me and my newspaper buddies started this about 5 years ago, and do that. And I would point people towards the 19 of Green, my book. It's been a wonderful run. I've enjoyed it very much. And you can go to Amazon.com, just do a search on the 19 of Green, and they'll be happy to send you one. And
you can hit that QR code right there on the screen if you want it. That'll take it to Tony's website, and you can buy it direct from him. So
yeah. Hey, look, man, and Coach Johnson, incredible insight, and everybody watching, and executive producer Brendan Martin, always 110% great job. But live in the greatest country in the history of the world, people. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Follow these guys; they put out great stuff every single day. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Sure.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.